Hi, today I have joining me Amelia Thomas, which I am so excited for. She's an amazing human being, and I can't wait to have a really great conversation. So, welcome to the channel, Amelia.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So, let's just start with sharing with my audience who you are and how we know each other.
Fantastic. So, once again, my name is Amelia Thomas. I am the managing partner of Empire Capital Ventures. We basically work with business owners and real estate investors to help them build their wealth dreams. I met Elizabeth through another organization that I'm partnered with. Elizabeth was looking for new members to add to her money team, and we were partnered together, and we've been working together for maybe a year, maybe even a year and a half now. I can't even believe it's been that long, Elizabeth.
I know, right?
So that's how we got to know each other. And of course, in our conversations, podcasting and just putting ourselves out there and going live came up, and we here we are.
Yeah. I started the journey because I was looking for an accountant because I have zero. I'm a therapist. I don't want to be doing my taxes and figuring all this stuff out. But on the way, one of the things that kept coming up over and over is our behaviors, our habits, how to change how I think about it, my mindset around money, my behaviors around money, about my business, about how I see myself. And that is a big reason why I was so excited to bring you on this channel because I started it for two big reasons. The first one just being I wanted to provide resources for people who don't necessarily want to go to therapy or don't necessarily need therapy. But everybody needs a little bit of help around money, finances, mindset, behaviors. And so this is just a really great resource to talk about that. And the second reason I started this podcast was just to put myself out there, right? Start joining the bigger conversation. And especially with an election coming up and the world the way it is, I know not everybody talks about money, but everybody thinks about money, especially when they hit
Absolutely.
that grocery store or when tax time rolls around, whether they want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason I'm really excited to have you on the channel today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation, honestly.
Great. All right, so let's start. I usually start with the mental health industry, but I'm actually going to start with your journey. Everybody has a story of how they got where they're going, but since we're talking specifically around behaviors and habits, what was your journey to start a practice in a male-dominated field in finance, which is a big one? What was your journey to get here?
Elizabeth, believe it or not, my journey started when I was about 14 years old. And I like to share the story of have you ever heard of that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad
Oh
by
yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki? Okay. So I'm going to talk about my rich uncle, my poor dad, and their brothers. So growing up, I noticed that my dad did not believe investing in the stock market. He was a avid saver. He just saved. But I had an uncle who invested into the stock market. He invested into rental properties. And as I got older, in my teenage years, I just started seeing the drastic contrast between these two brothers. And I used to always wonder why my dad would not invest into the stock market and things like that, but he was just completely risk averse versus my uncle who knew that, hey, over a long period of time, 20, 30, 40 years, that these investments will really pay off. And so I just started paying attention to my rich uncle versus my poor dad, and it just sparked something into me. And so one year I asked him, I said, hey, will you teach me how to invest into the stock market? I was 14 years old. And he said, sure, when you get a job, I'll teach you how to invest into the stock market. I turned 15, I went and got a job. And he never really did teach me how to start investing into the stock market, but it did spark my interest to start learning more and more about the industry, about how people make money into the markets. And so at the age of 16, I was actually speaking on colleges and universities, teaching college students about credit reports and scores. At the age of 18, I went and got my insurance licenses. It was the earliest I could do, started selling insurance. By the time I was 21, I had my initial security licenses to offer people stocks, not stocks at that age, but mutual funds and bonds, that type of thing. And then it just kept going. Before I knew it, I was in stocks, bonds, I was in managed accounts, I was in investment banking, and I have just worked my way up through the industry. However, around 2015, 2016, I began to get I just became very disgruntled with the industry. I started noticing that a lot of people from marginalized communities, minorities, women, we just did not have the same access to information that other people had. And I wanted to make a change in the industry. In 2018, I actually created ECV. In fact, at the time, it wasn't even ECV. The name came around in 2020, but I branched out. I left corporate America. I branched out to create a firm that was dedicated to helping women and minorities achieve the secrets of the 1%. Because there really isn't anything the 1% is doing that we can't do. They just utilize their assets differently than everyone else, but they're still using the same types of accounts that we have access to every day. And I've just been on a mission ever since, Elizabeth, to just continue to shrink that gap of knowledge between everyday Americans and the wealth secrets of the 1%. And so every day I just work a little bit more to help reduce that gap. And overall, I think I've been doing this for about 21 years now, quite some time.
Yeah. I got a little bit of a funny question. You mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
When did you actually encounter that book?
Probably when I was about 15, 16.
And where did you find it?
At the library.
At the library. I was going to say, because I remember looking, I looked all over my parents' house all the time for all sorts of stuff I shouldn't have been looking for. And I looked at the bookshelves. And to your point about information and access and all that, I don't remember finding one finance book. I remember the first money book, finance book, whatever you want to call it, showed up when I got to college and I had to take macroeconomics. And I was like, I hate this class. But it was the first time I was really exposed to this idea of money. And I was lucky. My dad talked to me, had a lot of money conversations with me that I know a lot of people don't get to have. But the idea of different points of view and information was not a resource I had available. And I had a library. I went there every week. I could have gone and found it. I usually stuck to the fantasy science fiction section. But I do think just having a couple books in your house can change everything. Even if your kid is just, what's that? Why would you read that boring book? Like that can open a new conversation.
Absolutely. Kids pay attention. Even when you think they are not, they are paying attention. So I don't have any biological children, even though I take care of a few. But my youngest nieces and nephews, they notice when things are different. They notice when I'm in a different car. They notice when they're visiting me at someone else's house. They notice how nice things are. They notice when I've switched my living room around. Like they just notice things. They notice a different chair. And the same goes with something as seemingly small as a book. They notice when you're reading things. I think I think it's not enough just to have it in your house, but they notice when you're reading. And they're like, oh, I want to read too. Let me pick up a book. Or when you try to make family time and everyone sits around and read together. But instead of just always reading books about the Babysitter's Club or whatever the case may be, let's throw in some fun money books. Just talking about money and the concept of money. To me, the moment a kid is old enough to start asking for money or to start asking for an allowance, they are old enough to learn how to start managing money. And they're certainly old enough to even learn the basic concepts of investing that money. So for my youngest nephew, he loves Jordans. He's only 9 years old. And at his age, his shoes are $130. So
Wow.
right at this moment, I am trying to instill in him like, hey, Why don't we own a share of this company and let this money grow? For this same amount of money that we're going to spend on this shoe, we can buy a share of stock. And of course, he doesn't understand all of the technical components of that because he's only 9. He does now understand that, hey, if I invest this money in here, in this one particular bank, he doesn't understand bank accounts, but he does understand banks. If I put this money in this bank, that this money can be more over a longer period of time. Now, again, he doesn't know like by how much or anything like that, but he knows it can grow and that he can have more money instead of actually putting the shoe on your foot. So these are the concepts that I'm trying to instill in my nieces and nephews now, especially because when I was growing up and I wanted to invest in the stock market, you literally had to have all of the money to buy one share. Now you can buy fractional shares. If you only have $10, you can still invest in McDonald's. You can still invest in Nike. You can still invest in Under Armour. These companies that we spend so much money with. So I think even just starting there as a parent with the products that you have laying around your home, when you think about how much you spend on them, you can start conversations with those kids about these products and how these products are made and how these companies make money, how these companies stay in business, and how you can be an investor instead of a consumer, or instead of always a consumer. We have to consume, but we want to be a good, healthy mixture of both.
You worked on one side of the street and now you're working on the other side of the street. And I'm guessing you had different types of clients in both businesses, right? You say you specifically work with women, people of color, people who haven't had the traditional forms of access. And you used to. When they walk in your door, I mean, you can even take me or some of your other clients, right? What is the fundamental thing that you wish we were prepared to talk about that maybe your previous clients like just walked in the door like, oh yeah, no, I already got that answer. I've already had that conversation. I've already talked about that.
That's a great question. If I had to just take a second to think about that, I think prepared to discuss would be death.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
It would be death. It's a topic that a lot of people do not like to discuss. They don't like to think about it. Even though we know everyone has a date, we just don't know what that date is. And we do not adequately prepare for it. We just do not adequately prepare for that date. We think we're going to be here forever. And we don't. We're not. And because of that, we don't take the necessary precautions with our planning that we should take. And these could be even basic things. You know, I mean, something as simple as go ahead and just get a $30 a month life insurance policy to make sure that you're not leaving behind debts and you're not leaving behind expenses to your loved ones, you know, when you do leave this earth, especially if you leave prematurely or before anyone was prepared for you to leave. Just simple things like that. So I would say death, number one, and retirement would be number two. Right now, just a short 25, 30 years ago, majority of Americans were in jobs that offered pensions, whether through the government, the school systems, or through their jobs. Now, only 18% of Americans have access to pensions. And so now you have hundreds of millions, in fact, of Americans who are woefully underprepared for retirement. Woefully. And many of them believe, mistakenly, that, oh, my parents had this money when they retired, so I'm going to have access to some of that money too. And that's not the case because most parents are going into retirement in more debt than they've ever been. Yes.
Which is not something I hear, right? We were talking about the wider world. When I read articles online, when I watch YouTube channels online, I hear about the silver tsunami and the wealth transfer and how there's all this money coming. And what I'm hearing from you is maybe, But for a lot of Americans, that's not necessarily true.
That's
And you don't
correct.
know which camp you're in until you have the hard conversation with your parents.
That's exactly correct. We are not having those conversations. In fact, just on August 25th of this month, I'm having a family governance meeting with one of my clients and their family. We're calling the meeting, we're sitting down at their kitchen table, and we're discussing the financial condition of that family and what the parents want to happen to those assets in the event that they leave here. Now, we've already done the planning in terms of the estate planning and making sure everything is in order, but those kids don't know anything. If that particular client and spouse left this earth tomorrow, I would be on the phone with those kids in a matter of 2 days trying to explain, we need to do this, we need to do this, because they don't even know where their life insurance policies are. Something as basic as that. So we're having a whole family governance meeting the Sunday after next, just to get the whole family on the same page about that family's wealth and money and how the parents want things to move around upon their death. But those are not traditional or typical or common conversations that families have. In most cases, particularly right now, you got more retirees and more debt than ever before because they have been paying for their kids to go to college. And many of those kids were not able to successfully transition into careers to take care of themselves properly. Or if they did, it was much later in life, maybe 10, 15 years later. And so the parents have grappled with the burden financially over those years. And these parents, they want nicer things. They want bigger houses. They want the nicer cars, things like that. And they have went into debt for those things. So whatever retirement money some of these parents have, his pensions, things like that, those things die with them. It doesn't pass down to the kids. And yes, there are, because of the mass number of retirees that are retiring every day, the number is like 10,000 people are turning 65 every day for the next 20 to 25 years. Completely insane. So yes, you are going to see more transfer in wealth, but I also predict we're going to see a rise in homelessness. We're going to see a rise in individuals not being able to take care of themselves financially because those parents have been covering for their kids.
I don't know if this relates, but it feels like it does. I'm out in California, the land of the ridiculous home price. And it's like a common pastime. Like we talk about fires and we talk about housing. Like that, those are two things you can guarantee comes up at every gathering you're going to be at. And one of the things I hear anecdotally when I just talk to whoever's around me is the house. And you were talking about people dying, and a lot of people out here see the house as their kind of retirement savings. Like they didn't really have a big savings, they didn't, to your point, right? They don't have this huge nest egg, but they have this house. And look, if you bought it in the 70s and you can sell it for a few $1,000,000 now, like that's not
Significant.
nothing. But I also hear from people about how now they can't afford the property taxes, so they have to sell the house. Now they have to clear all the stuff out. The parents had let it fall into disarray. Just it's not as clear cut and simple as it appears on paper, maybe. So some of the conversations that they tell me they wish they had with their folks is, hey, can I come in earlier and cleaned out some of this stuff? Hey, could we have made a plan on what to do with this house earlier? Hey, maybe you don't need such a big house. Maybe we sell it and use that to make sure you can have a better life with a nurse or a caretaker somewhere a little bit smaller. And they didn't have any of those questions because mom or dad or both didn't want to leave, accumulated all this stuff, thought their kids would want all this stuff, and their kids don't. They
Don't.
don't want the antique dresser. They don't want the china. They don't want whatever it is that the parents think is so precious. And so they're grieving, they're sad, they're angry, and they have all this work to do to handle this house and get and sell it. Is that something with some of your clients and some of the families you work with?
Not here recently. However, in some of my previous positions, it is certainly something that I experienced. So, something that was really common. So, I used to be an investment advisor for USAA. which is one of the top military service companies in the country. And we would run across situations like that often, where we're having to advise service members on what to do with transitioning parents, or how to prepare for those conversations, or even spouses whose husband may have died in the line of duty, how to prepare for those type of conversations, or just prepare for those conversations in case it does happen. But you are starting to hear more and more of those conversations, Elizabeth, as more and more people pass. Every week now, almost, I hear my mom mentioning she's going to another funeral because someone else has passed. And I just realized that my parents are now at that age where people are passing and it's just a part of life. But those conversations undoubtedly are going to become more and more prevalent. I even have fights with my own parents about reducing some of the stuff or eliminating some of the, I like to call it, clutter that they have in their own house. My mom has closets of clothes that she hasn't worn in 20 years. I'm like, why do you have these clothes? Like, why? But I don't think they realize the burden it does place on the kid when they have to come in and clean out that house upon their passing. Emotionally, it is tough. In fact, many kids will avoid it, and they will avoid it as long as possible because the memories are just too painful to reconcile with. And it may even be costing them more money, but they don't care because they have to just reconcile with the feelings that they have about the situation of going in and throwing away these items that the parents love so dearly. My dad were to leave here, I probably would not be able to just part with his favorite recliner right away. I'm not going to sit in it because that's his favorite chair. But I probably would not be able to part with that chair right away. I don't think people take into consideration the emotional toll it takes when someone passes on, or maybe they haven't even passed on, but they've been admitted into a facility because they can't care for themselves any longer. But it's us kids that are now responsible for making sure that the house is sold, is cleaned out, is repaired. It's all of these things to get it on the market so you can have the money to take care of mom and dad in the assisted living facility or wherever they may be. And it's just hard. It's hard because we're also still working. We're not retired. So you have that added burden. And then, Lord forbid, if you have a family, you got young kids, it just really becomes a lot. And all of those things that take a toll on us emotionally, they ultimately end up impacting us financially as well. We don't make the best decisions. We start paying things late. Even our own bills, we might start paying those late because we just have so much going on in our minds. We just can't keep up with all of the different things happening. Now you have the added responsibility of handling all of your parents' financial responsibilities, wrapping up their estates if they passed, or paying their bills if they're still alive but can't handle things financially for themselves. It just becomes a lot. And so, yes, you're going to start hearing more and more of those conversations. And my word of advice would be, if those individuals are working with financial advisors, that they make sure that they share those concerns with their advisor so they can start building a plan on how to handle those situations, because it's not if, it's when. It's not if, it's when.
My dad did not avoid it. We jokingly referred to it as the death talk. And yet, all three of us, because I have two siblings, we avoided a really touchy subject. So we didn't avoid the death talk because that's cut and dried. But we avoided the health talk big time. My parents want to buy a new car, except one of them should absolutely not be driving anymore. And not one of us wanted to have the conversation. And you're talking to somebody who has car conversations for a living. And I don't want to have it. And I've talked to my siblings and they don't want to have it. And I know every family has a version of this, whether it's death or driving or health or the house. And one of the things I've been looking at recently for my clients and for myself is how can I get a little help? Because it seems like I should be able to do this myself, but it's really hard to look mom and dad in the eye and be like, I disagree with your assessment of your own health. I disagree with your mental capabilities. This is my mom and dad. I don't want to tell them that. And when they say no, I don't want to fight with them about it. I don't want to cause a problem. And so one of the pieces of advice I give people, and I'm looking at myself, is looking for people who help with these conversations. And that's sometimes financial advisors, that's some therapists, there's some people who are specializing in this. But I do look for people who specialize specifically in age and age related conversation, because it is hard to look an adult in the eye and say, actually, I know you've been making really decisions for yourself for 50 years, but now things are changing and I need you to take my advice. I know you wiped my ass when I was a kid. I know you wiped my boo eyes, and I still think you need to listen to me. And yeah, all these conversations we're talking about, I do encourage people, like, have your financial advisor there, have a third party there to help diffuse it, to help encourage you, to help stop you from shutting down and not bringing it up in the first place. Because no matter who you are, we all have topics we want to avoid saying to our parents
You know,
around these topics.
there's a whole group of financial counselors in the marketplace now who have specialized training in grief and trauma and elderly financial care conversations. And so while the traditional financial advisor, financial planner can have the conversations like you and I have, honestly, when it's ready, when it's time to bring in someone else to help have the conversation with the parents, it really needs to be someone like a financial counselor, someone who has dedicated, specific training dealing with elderly clients, because they just, again, back to the psychology, they know how to properly deal with some of the anger and the resentment that may come up in those conversations. And most advisors are not trained to deal with that.
That's
They're
a
just
good
not.
point. Yeah. Yeah. Because what
So
I'm scared of is not having the conversation. I'm scared of the anger
that's right.
they might bring to the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most advisors, including myself, we're not properly trained to have those conversations with the parents of a client. And so, therefore, financial counselors who are specifically trained in those particular areas are much better suited to support not only the client, but also to support the parents in that transition.
So I think this is a good place as we're talking about different resources. So one is this financial counselor. One is just having conversations in the first place with your kids, with your parents, with your
Yes.
spouse. For somebody who is a little nervous, maybe wants a book or is not quite ready to dip their toe, but knows they needs to start. What is a book that you said Rich Dad Poor Dad was influential, but what would be a book that you would recommend to today's generation, to today's people about money, finance, psychology, behaviors?
Whew, that's a tough one. I don't really know if I have a book per se, particularly towards the latter conversation that we were just having about grief and trauma and dealing with elderly care situations, even elderly abuse situations. I think that's going to be very specific. But one book that I actually have right here, I'll show it to you. Have you ever heard of this book?
The Happy Pocket Full of Money. I have not.
So this is actually a really great book to help you identify some of your mindset issues around money, some things that have been holding you back, to help you just move the needle forward in your financial journey. Lots of great information on how to get support with the various aspects of your life financially. Lots of great information about rounding out your money team, because one person can't do it all. And it really does tackle a lot of those limiting beliefs that we were speaking about earlier around money and finances. I think I shared with you the story earlier how I wish I had majored in psychology, or at least minored in psychology when I was in college because I can tell someone what to do until I'm blue in the face. I cannot stop them from acting or doing things in a certain way unless they're ready to make that change. And so this book actually tackles quite a bit of that. And I think this will be an excellent read for anyone who's working to strengthen their net worth, or just strengthen their mindset around abundance. It talks a lot about wealth, but they also talk about wealth in different aspects, meaning health, wellness, spirituality. I think a lot of those things impact ultimately our finances and how we show up in this world. I actually had someone ask me just last week, what are the top 3 things you think that impacts a person from a financial standpoint? And I told them with certainty is who you procreate with, who you marry, and how you show up in this world. And they were like, what do you mean how you show up in this world? And I was just like, I'm sure you've heard of the stories with people who only have 5th and 6th grade educations, or maybe only have a high school degree, and they are billionaires. It's because they had confidence in themselves. It's how they show up every day in, day out, and get the work done. I was just like, I know some brilliant individuals, but they are stuck. They're stuck because they do not have the confidence that they can move the needle in their life. And that's inner work that people have to work on. I just want to throw that out there too, because the book does focus on money in abundance, but it also focuses on wealth in other aspects in abundance, and how to focus and hone in on those things, because ultimately they tie back to your network.
Say that all the time about people. They're shocked when I'm having conversations and they go, oh, what's your number one money tip? And they think I'm going to give them a stock tip, or this is just friends you're talking. I'm like, who you marry. Because if your partner can't agree with you about the value of a house, or the value of saving, or the value of the type of education you want to give your kids, not only is that going to be painful, not only is that going to cause a lot of conflict, but divorce is hell on finances. Now, any couple who comes in the door, I'm like, I know you're not here because you like me. I know I'm here because I'm cheaper than the divorce attorney. That is why you show up in couples counseling. Finances are real. It's a big deal. And I do say, yeah, it's important who you surround yourself. And it's not just your wife, right? Like, it's also your friends, the people you hang out with. It doesn't do any good to have a partner that's on your side if all your friends are always encouraging you to outspend or
Absolutely.
do more than you can. And the
Partners,
second,
throw that into the mix too.
and then the second part is that persistence piece, just getting out there, doing it, showing up, taking persistence. I'm starting this YouTube channel, and it's not because I think I'm excited about it. And it's not because I think it's going to be a brilliant success. It's because it's showing up. It's saying, you know what, I'm going to have confidence in what I have to say, and I'm going to be persistent about it, because persistence gets you a hell of a lot farther than you think it will. I think that's part of what you were trying to say about just the way you show up in the world. Some of it's confidence, and some of it's just making the choice. Because it's easy to come up with a reason why it's not ready yet.
Yep.
You could do one more thing, make one more plan, make it a little bit more perfect. And so I think it's really important for people to say, yeah, that's true. And just show up, and a lot of things can happen in a really amazing way.
Grit, perseverance, determination, those are very essential skills and characteristics that ultimately impact your pockets. They really do.
All right, then on that note, why don't you tell the channel a little bit about your new channel that you're just starting before we say goodbye?
So I was really hoping you would forget about that.
Not a chance.
But no, I'm also starting a channel. It's called Amelia T's channel. Starting next week, you'll probably see more consistent content out there, because we'll be going live about 3 to 4 times a week. But it will be all money related, or things that impact money. We'll certainly have conversations about mental health and wellness. Those things also impact your bottom line. And I just think there's so much opportunity in the marketplace. And there's so many people who just aren't really sharing their wisdom. So I just decided that, hey, I'm going to put it out there and we'll just see what happens.
Great. You're showing up just like you're walking your talk. I love
Showing
it.
up.
All right. Then we'll make sure I include that in the description where your website, your YouTube channel, where they can find you, because you've been amazing to work with. You've definitely changed my mindset.
Oh, thank
And,
you.
you know, we're just putting our voices out there. And I think that's really important. We need more
Absolutely.
voices out
Absolutely. I
there. All
really
right.
appreciate your time today. This was awesome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the channel, and we'll see you soon.